Today's webinar is focusing on using sevens and tens in a graduated return to rugby and return to pitches. My name's Colm Finnegan and I will work across the rugby and participation departments here in Irish Rugby. Look, we've some fantastic experts today lined up for you. We've Simon Broughton, Anthony Eddy and Lucy Mulhall here to share their expertise with you, to give you a little bit of an insight into their journey in sevens and some of the opportunities around that for skill development in this current time. Look, without further ado, what we're going to do is we're going to bring the Director of Sevens and Women's Rugby, Anthony Eddy, in to go and run through a presentation and give us a bit of an overview of, I suppose, some of the opportunities that we have in this current time and how we can actually go and utilise, sevens as a medium for skill development in what we're doing.
So obviously we've already had one Olympics with the sevens as part of it in Rio. So that the announcement of the sevens being part of the Olympic program probably revolutionised the game, in all honesty. And there's been an enormous growth from a participation point of view as well in not just Ireland, but like many countries. Some of the countries embraced the Olympic opportunity very early, and they're the ones that have definitely had enormous success with their growth numbers and their development. So as I've said here, the opportunities, it's a unique opportunity to grow the game beyond rugby's traditional areas of support, particularly amongst the women through the sevens program. I think sevens has been a great introduction tool for both men and women, but particularly for women because of the limited contact, I suppose, compared to a game of 15s. From an expansion point of view, World Rugby have embarked on a large scale global expansion of the sevens game to secure its spot in the Olympics, and they've invested a lot of resources and finance into, again, many of the non-traditional rugby playing countries, and they've had some really good success there to introduce the game of rugby through sevens to some of those countries. And then to capitalise on it, you needed to be in early. You needed to look at the opportunities, and it was and is essential that they also embrace the significant reform and investment into sevens. As I said before, and in all honesty, I think Ireland we were slow on the uptake. I have to admit, so are a few of the other countries, but the ones that were successful, or the ones that did embrace it very early, USA, Canada, the traditional countries such as New Zealand and Australia, they're the ones that have had some really good success with the game over the last probably 5-6 years. Just the next slide. Our goals in the IRFU, we want to compete at the elite level all the time, and through the sevens, there's a number of opportunities. We want to be on the world stage, and we want to be recognised on the world stage as being very competitive teams. So through the Europe competition, we have both men and women that now compete at the top level of Europe. The men have won Europe a couple of years ago, and the women are extremely competitive on that stage as well. We have both teams as core teams on the World Series. The men only recently through their victory in Hong Kong, and unfortunately their first World Series was disrupted by COVID, but it's been a fantastic achievement for the program and for the players themselves, both men and women, to be recognised on the World Series and be a core team. We also have a World Cup recently. 2018 was the last one in San Francisco, where we had both the men and the women competing. We have another one that they'll have to qualify for in 2022 in Cape Town, and then ultimately is the Olympics. We were unsuccessful around Rio. Unfortunately, our girls were unsuccessful with Tokyo, and our boys are still alive for Tokyo. But with where the squads are at now and the depth of talent that's coming through the underage programs, and the fact that France have already qualified for Paris in 2024, it's a real target of the IRFUs to ensure that we have both men and women at the Olympics in Paris 2024. Something that's very achievable as well, and I think it'd be great for the game. Just talk about some of the benefits for the sevens game. So we do work hand in hand around the sevens and the 15s and use it as a development tool for players to be able to transition into the 15s game as well. If you look at the next slide here, this takes us back to 2015 Rugby World Cup squads for the men's, and it just shows how some unions have and continue to use the sevens game as a development tool for their 15s program. Unfortunately, you see there that Ireland is 0 and so too is Romania, but come the next World Cup with the likes of possibly Hugo Keenan, Will Connors, a number of other players that can come through that program. Hopefully Ireland managed to end up with 2, 3, 4, maybe possibly 5 players that have come through the sevens program as well. But you can look at the success of what New Zealand have had and a couple of the other countries where they're 9, 10, 11 players that have been introduced to the game through sevens. Just 3 points here very quickly from an international point of view. So just the increase over the last 5 years of what we've managed to do from an IRFU perspective, being on the World Series and having the exposure that we've had. From the provincial perspective, just to be able to develop players and use sevens as a pathway for some of those players. I've mentioned before Hugo and Will, but there's plenty of others with Shane Daly, Cormac Izzy up in Ulster, and a number of others. So we're continuing to try and utilise the academy programs through and utilise it as a development tool for the academy programs as well. And then also just for the male and female pathways into the elite game of rugby. So it does introduce them to a form of rugby, and if they're athletic enough, and it does also open up the opportunities to target, I suppose, the people that are the non-traditional type of people get perhaps get introduced to the game of rugby late. So developing our players that allow all players to develop to their potential, and some of the skills. It's a very simple game, sevens. So some of the things that I'm a great advocate of from a player development point of view, in the sevens program, you actually perform the functional roles of the game a hell of a lot more than what you do in a game of 15s. So it also requires highly developed physical abilities, speed, mobility, power and endurance. It takes a special type of athlete to be able to play the game of sevens at the top level, and you need to be extremely fit, but you also need to be very resilient to be able to perform day in, day out, game in, game out, and from tournament to tournament. So the skills required to be successful at sevens is highly transferable in the 15s game as well. Probably as you've seen with some of the players that I've mentioned that have transferred into the senior men's team. You still have to be able to be an outstanding catcher and passer, an outstanding tackler, good at high balls. You know, Hugo gets patted on the back for his high ball receipts. Will Connors gets patted on the back for his tackling. All those two players with those skills were invaluable to the sevens program. And it still has the contact of the game as well around the breakdown and the contest for possession. Sevens can provide an excellent environment and format to develop a player's individual skills and game awareness. So again, as I said, you're actually performing the skills a hell of a lot more in a sevens weekend than what you are in a 15s game. This next aspects that sevens can develop, just the simplicity of the game. So some of the skills that I was referring to there, I won't necessarily go through all of those because you can read them yourselves, but just the vision and awareness and the use of space is extremely important in a game of sevens or 15s. And also from a talent identification perspective, if you want to identify or look at the skill and accuracy and the professionalism of a player, it's a lot easier to do that in the sevens environment rather than the 15s because of the number of touches they get on the ball or the number of involvements they actually get during the sevens tournament. And this sort of gives you a bit of a comparison. This is it's actually from an under-18s tournament some time ago where it compares a sevens player over a weekend, including 6 warm-ups and everything else. Or sorry, no, it's just the games, including the games, to a 15s player who played 80 minutes of rugby as well. So and they're both outside backs. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of involvement through the 15s game for this particular player. As you can see, no passes, 3 breakdowns, 3 rucks. So the involvement of what the sevens player did is enormous compared to what the actual player who stayed and played the 15s game did. And it just sort of points out the fact there that, you know, you're making 18 tackles compared to 2. So if you're forced to make 18 tackles, you're going to become a better tackler than if you only have to make 2. But it's a tough game to play, and it takes a special type of person. But it does make you a better rugby player. There's no doubt about that.
Thanks, Marianne. And look, really appreciate that insight there. And you know, it's crucial to get such a great insight, you know, from one of the top people in development in Irish rugby in that sphere. You know, so many interesting things there that you brought up, and you can really see that trend in the international players coming through with, you know, Hugo Keane and Will Connors, and if you look at the women's game, you know, Katie Fitzhenry, Eve Higgins, Amy Lee Murphy-Crowe, and Stacey Flood even just more recently, and those opportunities and how they can then interact with that as well. Look, thanks a million. We will come to you slightly later for a question possibly. Folks, please feel free to keep getting those questions in on our question and answer function. And this is being recorded, so you know, if you're furiously scribbling notes, don't worry, we will send out all sort of information involved with today's webinar. Look, great pleasure now to go and call in Simon Broughton. Simon is currently working as an elite player development officer with Leinster Rugby and has a vast experience across 7s and 15s. Simon, thanks a million for taking the time to join us.
Thanks, Colm. I really appreciate the opportunity to be involved in the discussion today, particularly with all the other participants that are beside me. I suppose I just want to explain a little bit around my experience of 7s. Obviously, coming from New Zealand, where rugby is probably the #1 sport in the country, but I was a late developer. I didn't start playing rugby until I was 14. My dad was a rugby coach, but I didn't actually start playing the game until 14. So it took me a while to build up my capacity to play the game, particularly in 15s. But I was lucky enough when I left school at 18 years of age, I went to a club called Auckland Marist. And in the summer pre-season, they use 7s as a tool to develop the game, particularly the skills of the game. And Pat Lamb was my first coach, and he was our 7s coach for our club. And he created a unique environment where on a Wednesday and a Friday at 6 o'clock, he would ask the players to meet down in a place called St. Helier's Domain, which is just a community kind of area of grass in Auckland, and we would set out T-shirts to be the corner posts, and we would just play 7s for an hour. So whoever turned up would get a chance to play, and we would just roll on and roll off subs. But what he created was access and opportunity for anyone within the club, didn't matter what age you were, to go down. And obviously the climate and the time of year helped, because people didn't mind going down and running around the park at 6 o'clock on a Wednesday or a Friday evening. But I got a chance to train and play with, at that time, some Auckland and New Zealand internationals. You're talking about guys like Waisaki Satutu, Terry Wright, Bernie McCarhall. These guys would go down on those evenings and play and use it as a form of getting fit. And then me, as being an 18-year-old kid, getting a chance to learn from those guys. And I think I have Pat to kind of thank in terms of creating a culture that I have really fond memories of. And obviously I then transitioned into playing 7s competitively, and having the chance to travel around the world and play in tournaments, you know, in Southeast Asia and Dubai and Argentina. So my memories of 7s as a player was, you know, a really good culture of good friends, working hard with each other and traveling the world.
Brilliant. Yeah, look, I suppose as first coaches go, it's kind of above average to have Pat Lamb coming in there. Look, really interesting to kind of see that late development and what some of the key points you've picked up on there, the access and opportunity. And look, as we return and get back on pitches in this ready for rugby period, that's exactly what we need to be doing, is creating access and opportunity. I suppose, Simon, just to move it on a little bit, you not to get stuck in the middle with you, but I suppose, how do you see, you know, sevens or even tens as an opportunity, you know, in our return to pitches?
Well, I think with the return to training protocols that have been set out by the government, where we're in pods of 15 initially, that lends itself immediately for us to be able to play 7-on-7. And so straight away you have the opportunity for the coaches to create that training environment where the players can use the core skills of the game to improve, both from I suppose a competitive point of view, but also understanding space and how to use space to benefit yourself from an attack point of view. And obviously, if you flip it on its head and talk about defence, how do you, you know, as a team work together and connect and try and close down the space to try and win the ball back. So I think for what's ahead of us in the next kind of like few months, I think there's a great opportunity for every coach that's coaching at every level to start engaging with that type of format of the game and see if we can identify players that will actually be very good and excel in that particular area.
Yeah, I couldn't agree any more than that. Simon, look, thanks a million for your insight there. Some really interesting nuggets there. What we'll do is we'll move on to our last expert, and then we'll possibly circle back for a question just towards the end. Look, folks, I'm delighted to go and introduce the Ireland Women's Sevens captain, Lucy Mulhall. Look, we're delighted to have you in with us today, Lucy, and thanks a million for taking the time.
Oh, no problem at all. I'm very flattered that you call me an expert. I'm still only 7 years into the game, so I still have plenty more to learn, but I certainly have a massive passion for sevens, and it's changed my life in so many positive ways that I have so much great things to say about it, but I wouldn't call myself an expert, however.
Look, we'll have this argument later on, but no, look, you know, thanks a million for coming in, as I say, and look, you've alluded to it there. You're playing for 7 years. If you want to just go into your own pathway into playing sevens and kind of how you came to be where you are.
Yeah, so I was GA mad my entire life. Loved GA, played for Wicklow, and was very fortunate to be on an All-Ireland winning team in 2011, and that was my childhood dream. So rugby never really came across my radar till I was in second year of college. And I should have been concentrating in a lecture when I received an email asking if I was interested in giving sevens a go as an Olympic programme, but also as an opportunity as a female athlete to, they were just about to centralise, so to potentially train semi-professionally. And for some reason, it was risky, and it changed my life in so many positive ways. I don't know what pushed me to do it, but I replied saying that I'd give it a go. And 2 weeks later, I was in Amsterdam playing on the back pitches in Amsterdam Sevens in a development tournament, just giving it a go. And like, I didn't have a clue. I didn't understand the whole ruck situation. I didn't understand much about it, but what I got straight away was how reliant you are on other people, how important it is for you to work hard, but also like it creates such an intense bond with the people who you play on the field with, because you're so reliant on those people. And I fell in love with it straight away because of that. The element that no matter how good you are, it really matters to 7 people on the field. It's the sum of the average as opposed to having one excellent player, and that got me straight away. So I've been very fortunate to get to play for my country numerous times, and lucky as well, very fortunate to captain such a great group. But yeah, it's been a whirlwind. It was a year later when I got capped then for my country, and we've been fortunate to play on the World Series and get to go to many great destinations around the world playing rugby.
Brilliant, and to be described by some as a sevens expert. No, look, you know, I suppose that's a fantastic insight there, and you know, I'm a loud man, so we wouldn't know much about winning All Irelands in Gaelic or anything really. But I suppose, you know, you've spoken about some of the key things there about the trust you need to have in your teammates, the bonds that you create, and getting to travel all around, which must really add to things. I suppose if you were going to say, you know, 1 to 2 of the key skills that you've actually developed and you've seen improve through that period of playing sevens on a more consistent basis, is there anything that really sticks out that you've improved?
Yeah, so thinking about this, there was a few things that definitely transfer from GA, and I've seen players Likewise, Hannah Tyrrell, Emer Constantine transferred them over, where it's like evasion and awareness of space or kicking. But for me, coming directly into rugby, passing an oval ball, I spent hours and hours and hours, and I still spend hours and hours. It's my #1 practice all the time. I don't think you can never become a good enough passer, so that's definitely something that I've had to work really hard on, to try and develop and try and like, you need it on the World Series so much. And then tackling is the other side of it. I love it. It's my favorite part of the game, but it's also, you have to become aware of, like, I'm a smaller person, so tackling like bigger girls, like, it's so technical, but then also there's an element of attitude as well with it. So they're definitely the two biggest skills that I think I definitely focused on when I first started, because I couldn't get involved in rugby without those two.
Yeah, exactly, and probably the two key differences between, you know, the oval ball and playing with a rugby ball. Lucy, thank you so much for your insight there. And look, we might circle back here for a question now, just towards the end of this question and answer period. Thank you. Look, folks, as I said, we have moved to the portion of the webinar where we're going to get into our question and answers. So please feel free to get any more in there. Look, I suppose we might go to yourself, Simon, first. Look, one here, and it is very subjective, so feel free to be as long-ranging or to tell me to go away if you want, but would sevens be more beneficial to forwards or backs?
Well, good question. I'll take you right back. When I first started playing with Pat, we had a guy called Kevin Napier who was in our team, who went on to play tight head prop for the Crusaders. So I think anyone can play, but obviously it's suited to players that have a wide-ranging skill set, but also have the capacity to be able to cover the amount of meters on the pitch, particularly at the top end. You need to have the capacity to be able to run and get up and run again across larger distances that you would in the 15s. But I also think that there's areas for, you know, tall players in particular, if you talk about winning restart receipts, which is a crucial aspect of the game. So anyone that's tall, I think, is an advantage, particularly in sevens, because if you win your restarts, you go a long way to securing possession and controlling the game. But I think if you enjoy the game of rugby, I think to kind of take what Lucy mentioned about relying on others and ensuring that there's camaraderie and working hard for each other, I think it doesn't matter what particular size or shape you are. I think you can contribute to the game.
Yeah, no, look, I completely agree. And look, when you're speaking about that high feeling in the receipt, you know, Lucy mentioned Hannah Tyrrell earlier on, and you know, you can see all those skills developed over time about how Hannah feels a high ball and then transfers over into 15s as well. Look, thanks a million, Simon. Really appreciate that. Anthony, look, we'll come to yourself next. I suppose there's a few people, you know, looking at how they can get involved in sevens and how, and you know, what sort of plans we have going forward about getting involved and running things in that nature. So look, I suppose I'll throw to yourself. If someone was looking to get involved in sevens currently, how could they do that?
Well, the best way to do it would be possibly just to contact myself. We're just trying to get some domestic sevens up and running around the country at some stage in a formal competition, similar to what Simon spoke about before. You know, we've got to be able to provide the access and then the regular competition around a sevens format. So, you know, to be able to introduce it through a schools competition, then to be able to have an under 16s and an under 18s, you know, interprovincial tournament that happens as well, and also to link in with the universities. You know, we're not doing anything new by all of this, and it's sort of trying to replicate what some of the other countries have had enormous success around by developing the game as well. So the universities is a real good target for us to introduce players to the game of sevens, so too as the schools. So that's something that ourselves and the domestic game are working hard on once we get back into playing rugby more formally.
Perfect, thanks, Marianne. And just to that, I suppose, Amanda Greensmith, and yourself, obviously, then there is currently work towards ex-rugby sevens, which is the kind of first step into sevens for some of those school age players. And there has been a revamp of that program, which is going to go live in schools come September. So, anyone who wants to can have a look out for that as well. Thanks a million, Ant. We'll take everyone off the hot seat now, except for Lucy. So look, we'll finish off with yourself here. There's a question come in. Do you see more experienced rugby players joining from underage rugby? I suppose the questions come in from Heidi here, and she's saying that she understands that there's ways of identifying talent there. And what's your understanding of players kind of coming in these days?
Certainly, I think, sorry, my lights are just after going off. Certainly, I think any of the girls that have came in from underage, I had the pleasure of coaching the under-18 sevens team a couple of years ago, and the girls, like the likes of Eve Higgins, Emily Lane, Dorothy Wall, all those girls that you see playing now, they have such an advantage. I wish I started playing when I was 5, let alone 15 or 16. That definitely any of the girls that are coming into the programme now are primed because they have that skill of tackle, pass, they have the awareness of rucks. Then it's just seven specific, and it's much quicker as well, because I think the World Series has went to a level that I certainly, if I started out right now straight in from GA, I would have struggled massively. It's gone to a really high performance level. So the quality of girls now that we're getting through from underage, whether it be Give It a Try programs or from under 18 sevens, like they're just so much more experienced than us, and we're learning from them. And it's great to see that girls now in Ireland can start playing from much younger age, and they're coming in, and yes, they're experienced and they've got a vast array of skills ready. It's just a matter of learning the game of sevens then.
Yeah, brilliant. Look, no, really appreciate that. And one of the things you've mentioned there is the Give It a Try program, and registrations are currently live for that for clubs at the minute. Went live last week, and it's a fantastic opportunity for young girls and young players to get involved in rugby who have never played before, and who can go and, as they say, give it a try. Folks, that brings us to the end of today's webinar. Look, I can only say thanks a million again to our three experts, Anthony Eddy, Simon Broughton and Lucy Mulhall. A massive thanks to David Keane and Orla Fulham Smith for all their support on the back of house, and thanks to all of you for tuning in.